Monster fish. Are they bad for the hobby? Are we doing a bad thing by promoting these fish that can get huge on YouTube? Well, it could be argued, yes, what we're doing is wrong. But it could also be argued that we're helping them. Let's talk about that. All right, first things first, what is a monster fish? Well, truth be told, there's people that are watching this that are going to say, those ain't monsters. And the reason they'd say that is because there's really no definition for monster fish. If you ask me, I would just say monster fish are fish that get really big. There's no required size or anything like that. It's just big fish. These Oscars can get over a foot long, and the 3 bikers can get well over 3 feet long. That's pretty big.
That's what she said.
Excuse me?
That's what she said.
So whatever your definition of monster fish is, it really doesn't matter. Monster fish just get really big. So let's just move past that. These 3 Oscars and 3 bikers are my favorite fish that I own. I talk about them in almost every video I do and tell everyone they haven't really had the full experience of keeping an aquarium until they've had Oscars. I've even gone so far as to say this. The bottom line is this. If you don't like Oscars, you can go. And then against my better judgment, I followed it up with this. In my list for the top 10 tank mates for Arowanas, I included Oscars on that list. And I ended the segment by saying, if you don't like Oscars, you can go f yourself. And I realized that was a little harsh. So in this one, I'm gonna try to control myself by saying, if you don't like Oscars, you're a low-life piece of shit scumbag asshole that doesn't know shit about fish keeping, and you should just quit because you're a shit-stained motherfucker. Point is, I love me some Oscars. Regardless of how anyone feels about Oscars, this video isn't about them. It's about monster fish in general, and the Oscars and bikers are the only monster fish I have, so they're going to come up over and over again in this video. What this video is really about is whether monster fish are good for the hobby or not. Are we helping the hobby by promoting big fish that can outgrow almost any home aquarium in less than a year? Or are we just talking about what we think is cool while at the same time dooming these fish to a life of misery? Well, my answer to that question is we're doing both. We're showing you these really cool fish and we're teaching you how they should be kept properly, but unfortunately there's something that happens in this hobby that's almost inevitable. One of the things I've preached over the years on this channel is to control your impulses. Control the urges to buy whatever you see that's cool before researching it. If you'd taken the time to research the fish you're looking at, you would have probably realized they require way more than you can provide. But unfortunately, we live in a world where people believe they should get what they want simply because they want it. And when it comes to monster fish, this can be a huge problem. Let's talk about another fish that's incredibly popular in the hobby and fits this conversation perfectly: Arowanas. This is another fish that I've talked about on this channel many times as one of my absolute favorites. And if I'm being honest with you, when I first got into the hobby, it was an Arowana that got me into it. I bought a silver Arowana and put it in my first tank, a 29-gallon. Let me repeat that. I put an Arowana in a 29-gallon. This is a fish that can get well over 36 inches in length, and I put it in an aquarium that's 30 inches wide. I made the mistake that we're talking about in this video. I bought a fish and put it in the biggest tank that I can afford, and I thought I was doing really good by it. I did this because I saw something cool and I had to have it. I didn't care what anyone else said. Now, in my defense, it wasn't easy to do research back in 1993. You had to know somebody that had kept these fish before to know anything about them. Well, I didn't know anyone who had ever had an Arowana, so I just did what I thought was right. Now, I know what you're thinking, John, it's not like that anymore. The people at the fish store are much more responsible, and they wouldn't let you do something like that. And you'd be wrong. Well, I mean, not all of them are that way, but it's still out there. You never know what's going on in your fish store. Maybe it's a busy day and they just don't have the time to quiz you about the fish before selling it to you. And because of that, you end up with a fish that you have no business owning. So why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem for a lot of reasons. So you see a Midas Cichlid in a YouTube video and it looks really cool and you decide you're going to get one. You go to the local store and they have them. You pick out the perfect one, bring him home, and put him into your 29-gallon tank. Life is good. Things go really well for a while because the fish was only 3 inches long when you bought him, and you were like, man, look at all the room he has. But after 6 months, you're like, oh man, this guy's getting pretty big. And at a year, the fish is hanging out in the corner of the tank, completely depressed because he's almost a foot long and barely has room to move. This is when you realize you've got a serious problem on your hands. This is when things go from bad to worse because you know you need to put that fish in a larger tank, but the brakes just went out in your truck and you can't afford to get a bigger tank right now. So now you have a difficult decision to make. You know you have to get rid of this fish, but you don't want to go through the hassle of selling it to someone, and you don't know anyone that'll take him off your hands, so you do what many people do. You give him back to the pet store. This is a real problem because there's not many people out there looking for large fish. They want to buy small babies and watch them grow up. It's part of the fun. In fact, for me, when I bought my Oscars that went in this tank, they were only like 2 inches long and I watched them grow. It was so much fun. I put 2-inch fish in an 8-foot tank. They looked like little grains of rice swimming around. It was adorable. So the fish is sitting there in the fish store and he just sits there and sits there. He's the fish in the store that no one wants, no matter how pretty he is. Now, I know what you're thinking. Come on, John. Aren't you being a little overdramatic? I mean, they're fish. No, I don't think so. These are animals that are being neglected. If I was to tell you a story about how I was at the shelter today and saw a 5-year-old Rottweiler that had been raised in a 4x4 crate his entire life, you'd be like, "Aww." But when it comes to a fish, it's just a fish. These animals deserve the same respect as any other animals and shouldn't be mistreated. If you see a fish that you just have to have, take a step back and think about it for a minute. Can you provide a good life for that fish, and do you have a tank that can hold it for its entire life? Don't make the "I'll get him moved to a bigger tank when I have the money" mistake. That never works out. And finally, are you able to commit to this fish for its entire life? If you can't answer yes to all of these questions, then do the right thing and wait till you can. I know in this instant gratification world that we live in, that's really difficult to do, but trust me, it's better for everyone if you do. So then the burning question is, are we doing the right thing by exposing these fish to the masses knowing that it could result in any of those outcomes that we talked about earlier? Well, yes. Yes, we are. We're doing the right thing because we're showing people the way these fish should be kept. We're showing what's involved in caring for them and what life is like with these monsters in your life. So the bottom line is, if I show you the proper way to care for 3 Oscars and 3 bikers, and you decide to go out the next day and get those fish for yourself and put all 6 of them in a 29-gallon tank, that's not my fault. It's yours. And if you're somebody that did what I just said a year ago and now your fish are growing way too big for your tank, don't come blame me. I'm not the problem. The fish aren't the problem, and the fish store isn't the problem. You are. So that's it. If you liked this video, you can show me by clicking that like button and possibly even subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.